There is something deeply unsettling hiding inside the most ordinary moment of your day. Right now, as your eyes move across this frame, as the light from this screen strikes your retinas and your neurons fire in rapid succession down the long winding corridors of your optic nerve, you are not experiencing the present moment. You are experiencing the past. A very recent past, but the past nonetheless. And that singular physical fact, that one foundational biological truth, changes absolutely everything about what it means to be a conscious creature, navigating a universe that does not slow down for anyone. Let us begin with the physics, because the physics demands to be confronted first. Light travels at approximately 300 million meters per second. That number is so large it registers as essentially instantaneous to our human intuition. But the journey of a photon does not end when it reaches your eye. That is only the beginning of a far slower, far more complicated biological relay race. The photon strikes the photoreceptor cells inside your retina, triggering a cascade of electrochemical reactions. Those reactions generate a signal that must travel along the optic nerve, which conducts information at somewhere between 70 and 120 meters per second, not the speed of light, 70 meters per second. The signal then travels into the thalamus, through the lateral geniculate nucleus, and finally into the primary visual cortex at the very back of your skull. By the time your brain assembles that information into what you consciously recognize as a visual experience, somewhere between 80 and 150 milliseconds have already passed. 150 milliseconds sounds inconsequential. It sounds like a rounding error, but the universe does not deal in rounding errors. In 150 milliseconds, a professional baseball thrown at 90 miles per hour travels over 6 meters. In 150 milliseconds, a car moving at highway speed covers more than 3 meters of road. The universe has moved forward, and your perception of it has not. You are permanently, inescapably, looking at a recording of reality rather than reality itself. Now consider this. You are attempting to drive an extraordinarily powerful vehicle down a highway that is crowded, chaotic, and operating at terrifying speed. But the windshield in front of you has been completely blacked out. The only information available to you comes from a single camera feed mounted somewhere on the vehicle, and that feed operates on a strict 5-second delay. Every image you see is 5 seconds old. The car that was 1 lane over is no longer there. The obstacle that appeared on the left has already moved. The road that looked clear is already behind you. There is only one physical way to survive this situation. You cannot slow down. You cannot wait. You must take the delayed information and you must build, in real time, a continuously updated mathematical model of what the road ahead is going to look like before you arrive there. You must generate a forward simulation. You must, in the most literal sense, hallucinate the future using the physics of the past. That is not a metaphor for the human brain. That is the operational description of the human brain. The brain is not a passive recording device. It is not a camera. It is not a mirror. It is a forward projection system, a continuous probabilistic prediction engine that uses incoming sensory data not to tell you what is happening now, but to generate its best mathematical estimate of what is about to happen next. Every single conscious moment you have ever experienced has been a simulation, a highly sophisticated, extraordinarily accurate simulation, but a simulation nonetheless. The raw sensory data arriving at your cortex is incomplete, delayed, and deeply ambiguous. What your conscious mind receives is the brain's best prediction, heavily dressed with prior experience, constantly corrected by new incoming data, and presented to you with absolute seamless confidence as though it were ground truth. This is the foundational framework that makes sleep not a mystery, but a physical inevitability. When the sun descends and the environmental light diminishes, when you close your eyes and the rich, overwhelming flood of sensory input begins to slow and then stop, the brain does not power down. A system this sophisticated, a prediction engine this deeply embedded in biological survival, does not simply cease operations because the incoming data stream has gone quiet. What actually happens is something far more extraordinary. The prediction engine, suddenly liberated from the constant corrective pressure of external sensory feedback, begins to operate without constraints. Think carefully about what this means. During waking hours, the brain's predictive simulations are continuously being tested against reality. You predict the coffee cup is on the table. Your hand reaches for it. Your tactile sense confirms or corrects the prediction. The simulation is perpetually disciplined by the physics of the external world. But during sleep, that external check disappears entirely. The sensory correction signal drops to near zero. And the forward prediction engine, which never stops running because stopping would mean death, continues generating simulations into a void. Without incoming data to discipline it, the simulation engine does what any unconstrained mathematical system does when its boundary conditions are removed. It explores the full available phase space. It begins running scenarios. Not one scenario, but thousands of branching probabilistic futures simultaneously. The brain starts throwing together complex, high-dimensional variables, emotional states, physical environments, social dynamics, threat assessments, navigational challenges, and running what are essentially stress tests on possible futures. It is the cognitive equivalent of a flight simulator running emergency drills when the plane is safely on the ground. The bizarre imagery of dreams, the landscapes that shift without logic, the conversations that make no linear sense, the sudden appearance of people from years past placed inside environments that could not physically coexist. All of this is not psychological symbolism. It is not encoded messages from a subconscious mind trying to communicate in riddles. It is the mathematical residue of an unconstrained probability engine sampling from the full distribution of possible futures rather than the narrow constrained corridor of the expected present. The strangeness of dreams is not a feature of their meaning. It is a feature of their freedom. And now we must introduce the third force, because physics does not stop at perception and simulation. Physics also has a direction. The second law of thermodynamics states with brutal indifference that in any closed system, entropy, the measure of disorder, will increase over time. This is not a tendency. This is not a preference. It is a mathematical law so fundamental that it is the reason time itself has a direction. You can watch a video of a cup falling and shattering on the floor, and you know immediately that this event happened forward in time. You would know with absolute certainty if the video were played in reverse, because broken ceramic does not spontaneously reassemble itself into ordered form. Entropy increases, always. The future is always more disordered than the past. This is the arrow of time, and it is the most terrifying physical law a biological organism has to confront. For a fragile, soft, metabolically expensive creature like a human being, surprise is not merely unpleasant. Surprise, in the mathematical language of thermodynamics, represents an encounter with an unmodeled increase in entropy, an event the organism did not predict, a configuration of the world that falls outside the boundaries of its internal simulation, and the more severe the surprise, the more dangerous the entropy event, the more likely it is to be lethal. Predators do not announce themselves. Falls do not come with warnings. Structural failures do not politely wait for preparation. The brain, shaped across hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary pressure, has developed a deep, structural, almost violent aversion to entropic surprise, not because it is programmed to dislike chaos in some abstract philosophical sense, but because every ancestor of every creature alive today survived precisely because their brains were better at predicting disorder before it arrived. The lineage of life on this planet is, at its core, the lineage of increasingly sophisticated entropy prediction machines. Sleep is where that prediction machine does its deepest, most expansive work. When you dream of falling, when you dream of being pursued, when you dream of navigating an unfamiliar city or confronting a social situation loaded with threat, your brain is not processing unresolved anxieties in the way a therapist might frame it. Your brain is running Monte Carlo simulations on high-entropy scenarios. It is sampling from the tail end of the probability distribution, the dangerous, disordered, statistically unlikely but physically possible futures, and preloading your predictive architecture with response pathways. By the time you wake and face the actual world, your simulation engine has already rehearsed a staggering number of futures. The path from perceived threat to coordinated physical response has been traveled so many times inside the simulation that it has been biologically optimized. There is a concept in computational physics called prior loading. When you initialize a probabilistic model, the priors you feed it, the pre-existing probability distributions assigned to each possible state, Determine how efficiently and accurately the model will perform when real data arrives. A model with poorly calibrated priors makes expensive errors. A model with richly calibrated priors, loaded with information about the likely structure of the incoming data, performs with extraordinary efficiency. Dreaming is the biological mechanism by which the brain reloads its priors every single night. It is the nightly recalibration of the prediction engine. And here is the layer beneath that layer, because the physics goes even deeper. The brain does not merely predict the external physical world, it predicts itself. The internal states of the body, heart rate, hormonal fluctuations, immune system signals, metabolic demand, all of these generate signals that the brain must also model and simulate. The branch of neuroscience that studies this process describes the brain as a hierarchical predictive machine, constructing models at every level of organization simultaneously, from the molecular to the social. During sleep, that internal predictive modeling operates at full capacity in the absence of external noise. The brain is not just preparing you for what the world might do tomorrow, it is preparing your body for what it itself might need to do tomorrow. This is why sleep deprivation does not merely make you tired. Sleep deprivation degrades the predictive architecture of the entire organism. Reaction times slow. Emotional regulation collapses. Risk assessment becomes wildly inaccurate. The simulation engine, starved of its nightly recalibration cycle, begins generating predictions that are increasingly misaligned with the actual probability distributions of the physical world. The consequences range from poor decisions to catastrophic physical failure. Every major industrial disaster linked to human fatigue is, at its mechanistic core, a story of a biological prediction engine that was not given time to reload its priors. We began with the observation that you are not experiencing the present moment. We established that the speed of light and the finite conductance of biological tissue guarantee that conscious experience is always a reconstruction of the recent past, dressed as the immediate present. We showed that the brain compensates for this temporal lag by operating as a forward projection system, generating continuous simulations of the future in order to allow a biological organism to act in what appears to be real time. We introduced the law of entropy and established that the forward direction of time means the future is always structurally more disordered than the past, making accurate prediction a matter of survival. And we arrived at sleep, not as a biological mystery, but as the most efficient solution evolution has ever produced to the problem of recalibrating a prediction engine under conditions of minimal interference. Dreams are not windows into a hidden self. They are not coded messages. They are not the echoes of memory or the language of the unconscious in any mystical sense. They are the most sophisticated forward modeling system in the known universe, running at full power in the dark, throwing the full weight of its probabilistic machinery against the uncompromising forward march of time, preparing a fragile biological machine to meet an unknown future with the best possible simulation already loaded and running. When you wake tomorrow morning with the scattered, half-remembered fragments of some strange, impossible night, know that what you are recalling is not noise. It is the residue of your brain doing the most extraordinary thing any physical system in the known universe has ever been observed to do. It was fighting entropy. It was rehearsing tomorrow. It was running the numbers on futures that may never come, just so that if they do, you will already have been there. The universe does not pause. The arrow of time does not negotiate. And somewhere inside the architecture of your sleeping mind, the most advanced predictive engine biology has ever built is already preparing you for what comes next. You said, "Gag, create an SEO-friendly short description for a YouTube video, including relevant hashtags."